Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
Did you turn off the location feature by accident or on purpose? Today's heroine will do the same. Enjoy the show! You spent $250 on batteries for a toy plane. To say my wife Sarah was upset would be an understatement. How many times have I told you that this is not a toy? I decided not to mention that the 2 packs of batteries that had just arrived via FedEx cost me $1,250 each, not together. Okay, then. You still spent over $1,000 on a bunch of useless plastic, aluminum, and electric motors. And now you've spent $250 on more batteries. Technically, it's a professional hexacopter. I decided that correcting my wife by telling her that I had actually invested a little over $25,000 in this big spider-like structure might not be wise. I don't care what you call it, she said. It's still a useless toy for you to spend money on when you could be saving for our vacation. It's not completely useless, I replied. I've already been paid for 2 aerial photographs for a realtor, and I have 3 more scheduled in the next 2 weeks. 5 or 6 of these orders will recoup my investment, and the rest will be pure profit. If only your boss had a bit of brains, he would have taken me up on my offer. You could have had aerial photos of all your sites for half the price I offer other agencies. If I had had this drone last year when Jefferson and Murphy were shot, we could have caught the shooter before he hid his weapon somewhere in the woods, and we'd have more evidence of his guilt. If I can sell this idea to several departments, I can retire early and make drones commercially. No matter what you say, she retorted, you will never grow up. You will always be a dreamer. If everything was as simple as you think, everyone would already be doing it. Well, I definitely appreciate your trust in my abilities, I said, though it sounds like you don't really trust me. I remember you used to think I was pretty smart and told people I could do anything I put my mind to. So maybe others' opinions of me aren't that far off the mark. Well, we've been married for 21 years. And you don't make much more than when we got married. So despite all your smartness, we don't seem to be doing very well, do we? Of course, she used her fingers to make quotation marks in the air when she said smartness. Even I earn twice as much as you. Still, my salary is enough to cover the mortgage and all the utilities. It's amazing how this works out, huh? Unfortunately, law enforcement is not a career that makes anyone rich, at least not an honest cop. You could get your degree and become a lawyer, and then we'd never have to worry about money. It didn't matter how much money I made, I said. We'd still be scrounging for change 3 days before payday. How many pairs of shoes do you have in your closet, and how many of them have you worn more than twice? How many suits and handbags are in your closet with tags still on, and will probably never be worn? I saw a receipt from Ulta for over $200. How much makeup do you need to be a successful realtor? You've been hinting for 2 weeks that you want to trade in your 2-year-old car for a new model, I continued. My truck is 19 years old. You've had over half a dozen new cars since we got married, so don't complain to me about spending money. At least what I spend money on makes me a profit. My clothes and cosmetics give me a return on my investment. I need them for my career. Really? The only payoff I've seen is that you work late almost every evening and on weekends. We even canceled our plans for the 4th of July so you could finish work at the office. I rarely see you, and when I do, you're either unhappy or in a hurry to get out the door. We haven't used our bed for anything other than sleeping for over 4 months. That's not true, she said. I know it's been a while, but it hasn't been 4 months since we had a night, honey. It was May 8th, our anniversary. I almost had to tie you down then because Sutton wanted you to work late, and you were so angry that it became a rough task that we both just wanted to finish and forget. It's strange because not long ago you couldn't go without Intim for even a week. You didn't try to initiate intimate, and every time I did, you had some reason to refuse me. She showed enough grace that a look of stunned clarity flashed in her eyes for a moment before she lowered her gaze and turned away. I spoke much more calmly. Listen, honey, it's been a long week, and we haven't done anything on a Saturday together in months. Why don't we fill up the tank tomorrow morning and go to the mountains? Maybe we'll go to Duna or Helen, or even Blairsville or Murphy, and just spend the day exploring the tourist shops. I'm going with Jessica to her dad's to lay by the pool. I'm sure the expression of suppressed irritation on my face would be hard to misinterpret, but she didn't seem to notice it. This will be the 6th weekend in a row that you've gone to lay by the pool with Jessica. Are these your priorities? Would you rather spend the day lying by the pool in Kingston with Jessica than spend the day with me in the mountains? Who else will be there? Someone from the office? What, now you're going to tell me who I can and can't hang out with? You're going to decide how I should spend my time? I don't need your permission for anything, and I won't have to answer to you before I decide what I want to do and with whom. You're absent all the time, and you want to ask me where I go? It's none of your business who I talk to. You were against Jessica from the very beginning. You never liked her and just want her to ruin all my friendships so I can sit at home all day under your control with no one else to spend time with. I stood there, stunned and speechless for a few moments, not believing I had heard my wife's sudden tirade correctly before responding. Am I away at any time? I only go to work. I don't hang out with guys, go to sporting events, races, bars, or clubs. If I ever leave the house, I take you with me, but you invariably find a reason to refuse. I never told you that I expected you to be somewhere or not be somewhere. I never expected you to need my permission for anything. As for Jessica, no, I don't love her. She's been divorced 3 times because she was caught cheating on each of her husbands, and I don't think she's the best example for a married woman. But I never tried to talk you out of being friends with her or spending time with her. You know what? Okay, go lay by the pool with Jessica tomorrow. I still need to test these new batteries and see how much extra flight time they give. I know you're not interested in playing with toy planes. I turned away from her stunned gaze before she could respond and walked through the kitchen into the backyard to the prefabricated shed I was using as a workshop. I began packing my hexacopter and support equipment for tomorrow's flight. Not surprisingly, later that evening, when Sarah came to bed, she was dressed in long pajamas, lay as far away from me as possible with her face turned away, and fell asleep without saying a word. I lay in bed, wondering what happened in our marriage, where we chose different paths and went our separate ways. Looking back over the past few months, I kept coming to the same conclusion: something changed after Sarah started working at Sutton's estate agency. I thought back to the few work events I had accompanied Sarah to after she was first hired and realized that I hadn't been invited to any in over a month. At the events I attended, most of the participants were women. There were a few husbands or boyfriends and one slightly built, somewhat effeminate guy who seemed to be single, but the only other man was the agency owner, Paul Sutton. Paul introduced a blonde who looked no older than half his age and had clearly undergone surgery to improve her appearance, like his wife Carmen. Paul was loud and brash, with an endless list of crude jokes and sarcastic comments, and an unpleasant lack of respect for personal space. He constantly leaned over and touched everyone, men and women, but never gave the impression that his contact was anything illicit. Most of the guests actively ignored him, and the only woman he paid special attention to was his wife. However, I knew that Paul and I would never become friends. I never trusted him in any capacity. Nothing suspicious happened at those events that would make me suspect that anyone from the agency was acting improperly. Even now, looking back and trying to remember something, nothing stands out to me. But undoubtedly, at the first meeting, Sarah introduced me to her colleagues with such pride in her husband and family, holding my hand tightly and smiling like a lovesick schoolgirl, never leaving me for more than a few minutes. But now, a little over 6 months later, she seemed to despise my presence. I tried to figure out what I could have done to ruin our relationship. Did I spend too much time at work? Working in law enforcement is a career that tends to destroy relationships with its hours and stress. Few survive long. High levels of stress not only affect the officer who repeatedly faces extreme situations, often making life and death decisions in seconds or less, but also his or her partner, who sits at home worrying whether this shift will be the one that leaves them alone. Not everyone who lives in such a relationship survives in the long term. But I couldn't remember anything that changed during that period of time, except for her work. I had worked in the same position at SID for a few years before, and we had not had similar problems, so I didn't believe this could be the cause of our problems. So that brought me back to Sarah's job. I realized that we would have to discuss this situation, but after her outburst accusing me of being controlling, I was careful not to bring it up right away. I decided to let things cool down a bit before addressing it again. That night, sleep was rare and difficult to achieve, and I woke up just in time to find Sarah in the kitchen, dressed in a beach robe and putting towels and sunscreen into a large, colorful canvas bag on the kitchen counter. "What would you like me to buy for dinner today?" I asked. Without pausing to pack her beach bag or look my way, she replied, "You should probably take care of yourself today. Jessica and I are going shopping this afternoon and have a pedicure appointment, so we'll probably eat while we're in town. Maybe I'll even stay with her for the night if we drink wine." I wasn't sure if she was trying to provoke me because of my obvious dislike for Jessica and her influence on my wife, but I decided not to give her the satisfaction of a reaction. I just watched her glance at me before walking out the garage door and driving her 2-year-old Infiniti out of the garage. I spent the next 2 hours in a quiet, introspective haze, pushing the mower around our backyard. My mind worked like a trusty old single-stroke machine, never fast or hard, but steadily and inexorably. I never thought I had any reason to doubt Sarah or her love and commitment to me in our marriage. I accepted that our relationship had lost the fire and urgency of the first years, but to me, it was like an old, familiar, and comfortable chair, a refuge where I could relax without dealing with the corrosive urgency of the world. Maybe our marriage didn't offer the same comfort to Sarah, or maybe comfort wasn't what she needed. However, the truth I began to realize was that Sarah no longer considered me a worthy husband. I didn't know if she was already intimate with another man, but I was no longer sure that such a possibility was far from reality. But who could it be? She never mentioned anyone. Hell, she rarely told me anything at all unless it was necessary for communication. The only person she mentioned was, "Wait. No." I released the safety lever on the mower handle, and the engine died. I suddenly felt the urgent need for a bottle of water. I stood in front of the open refrigerator, enjoying the cool air that came from it. This August morning was already threatening the late summer heat that often haunts Georgia residents, promising more of its affectionate attention as the afternoon approached. My thoughts turned back to Sarah and what had changed in her. Could she have changed that much in the past 6 months? I could not recall a single incident that even suggested she had ever considered the possibility of an intimate relationship with another man. In fact, as far as I remember, she was always disgusted by it. No, I didn't believe it was possible, but it still didn't give me an answer to what was really going on. I decided to find out exactly where Jessica's father lived and planned to stop by for lunch and maybe take both women out to dinner so that neither of them would have to worry about driving after drinking. Maybe Sarah would appreciate my inclusion of Jessica and feel less obligated to explain or interfere. I was sure both women would appreciate something from Chicken Salad Chick. I had heard several women rave about the new restaurant in town, so I opened the Life 360 app on my phone to find Sarah's location. The only problem was that instead of her location, the app simply said location paused since 7:55. Now, alarm bells were ringing, red flags were everywhere because something was wrong. Why had she turned off Life 360? Why was she hiding her location? She wouldn't have done this if she wasn't hiding something from me. I felt as if I had stood up too quickly after sitting for a long time, experiencing a sharp wave of dizziness running from the top of my head to my knees, accompanied by the sound of a hurricane in my ears. I looked at my watch, 10:16. Over 2 hours ago, she had paused the location tracking app we installed on our phones a little over a year ago when Sarah wanted to know where I was while I was at work, so she could tell 911 where I was if something happened and they could find me if I couldn't answer the radio. I never told her that our department's patrol cars and trucks have GPS trackers built into them and dispatchers know exactly where we are at all times. I let her think she had an important connection to my safety if it was ever needed. Was this the real reason she suggested using the app, or did she already have a reason to hide and track where I was at any moment? Hoping she had simply paused the Life 360 app instead of turning off my phone's GPS, I turned on my laptop, opened iCloud.com, and launched the Find My iPhone app. I hate Apple products and refuse to own or use them myself, preferring Samsung and the Android operating system. However, Sarah insisted on having the latest iPhone available until the next one came out. Since I had to ensure that each new phone was loaded with all the necessary content, I had no problem logging in and tracking her phone on the Apple-provided map. The map I saw wasn't the most detailed, but it seemed accurate enough to indicate that Sarah was probably in the middle of a secluded cove on a reservoir about 25 miles east of Rome, where we lived, and about 15 miles from Kingston, where she said she would be. Perhaps Jessica's dad had a boat, and they decided at the last minute to go to the nearest big lake for a while. Deep down, I knew I was trying to find a logical explanation for what was increasingly looking like something I genuinely didn't want to admit. Until 24 hours ago, I never thought my wife could be anything other than devoted to me and our marriage. However, I hoped I was wrong. I opened Google Earth on my laptop to find the GPS coordinates and altitude of where the phone app showed my wife's location. Satellite imagery confirmed that my wife appeared to be in a secluded cove on Lake Allatoona, rather than at her friend's pool. Scanning the lakeshore, I found a spot where I could park. Although it wasn't in direct line of sight, it was a fairly direct route across the lake from where Apple had claimed my wife had been for an hour and a half. I could drive to the Cooper's Branch boat launch in about half an hour, and since I was already planning on testing my new 12,000 mAh batteries, I figured I could drive there in about 45 minutes. I started loading my gear into the back seat of my Ram 1500 crew cab. Using the online flight planning site SkyVOR, I determined that most of the lake, including the entire area encompassing my planned flight, was in a pocket of uncontrolled airspace between Cartersville Airport, Cobb County International Airport, and Cherokee County Regional Airport. I also confirmed that there were no nearby power lines crossing the lake. I closed the site without logging in or saving my search. Next, I launched Mission Planner on my laptop and began building a flight plan to program into my hexacopter. I saw two obvious routes. The first, just over 3 miles, staying over open water with 5 waypoints to reach a cove where the drone could fly above the tree line and hover for a while, taking photos of the area, and a direct route of about 2.5 miles, crossing 3 land masses. If I had chosen the water route, I could have maintained a lower altitude and avoided appearing on the radar of nearby controlled airspace. However, I had never flown that distance from the launch point, and although theoretically I would still be within range of my high-power, long-range video transmitter and my 16-channel digital transmitter if I needed to take over control from the autonomous flight program, I estimated the flight duration to be 7 or 8 minutes each way. I was also within the range of one of the 2 new 12,000 mAh LiPo battery packs that I had been criticized for the day before. I still knew I would be on the edge of my comfort zone with this flight, conveniently forgetting that violating the laws limiting my legal flight to visual line of sight could jeopardize my commercial flying license, and if the drone malfunctioned, it could pose a serious risk of injury or damage to anyone caught in its path. However, my life had suddenly taken a different path in the last 24 hours, and it didn't seem important to look too far into the future. Given that the lake's surface elevation is 840 feet above sea level, I felt comfortable setting the flight altitude to 950 feet, well below the legal limit of 400 feet above ground. Realistically, I could have taken the direct route, but finding and avoiding all the obstacles along the route would have taken hours, and I wanted to start as soon as possible. I considered the possibility that Sarah would notice the hexacopter and, suspecting it was mine, might check me out using the same app that led me to discover she was lying to me. So, I drove to a store about half a mile from our house and spent $148 on a prepaid cell phone, then forwarded calls from my Galaxy S9 to the cheap phone. I left the Samsung on the charger by my bed and loaded the last of my gear into the truck before heading east on US Highway 411 towards Cartersville. 33 minutes later, I parked in the picnic area at the Cooper's Branch boat ramp and was pleased to see that there were only 2 people there, an attractive dark-haired woman who looked to be in her mid-30s and a beautiful young red-haired girl, about 4 or 5 years old, who threw a yellow rubber ball and ran after it to throw it again. There weren't even any cars in the parking lot with empty boat trailers, so unless anyone came down the road, I didn't expect anyone to bother me. From the water, I found an area near the picnic table closest to the lake that was clear of trees and set up my tripod with directional antennas and a signal booster base aimed at my intended flight path. I then opened my laptop on the picnic table, plugged the telemetry receiver into the USB port, and launched Mission Planner. Once I had all the ground equipment set up, I took the Pelican case containing the Taro 690 hexacopter out of the cab of my truck and began to lock the 4 folding arms into their respective positions, retracting the 2 fixed arms. I attached the large, heavy battery pack to the Velcro strap on the bottom of the hexacopter frame, then wrapped 2 nylon safety straps around it to ensure it was securely attached and couldn't accidentally fall off during flight. I connected the battery to deploy the chassis, which seemed to consist only of wires and antennas with a GoPro Hero 3 Plus camera suspended below on a 3-axis stabilized gimbal. If this setup failed, the entire package would instantly be at the bottom of the lake, and since I was flying over the deepest part of the lake, the basin above the dam, which was about 145 feet deep, there wasn't much hope for recovery if that happened. After turning on the transmitter and base station and checking that my flight plan was loaded into Mission Planner on my laptop, I reconnected the battery to the hexacopter. Grateful that none of the motors suddenly started running, I began my pre-flight check, making sure all cables for the flight computer, telemetry transmitter, video transmitter, and remote GPS antennas were properly connected. I slowly increased the revs, checking the direction of all 6 flight motors before attaching the 13-inch carbon propellers. Once my pre-flight check was complete, I used onboard wireless telemetry to capture GPS coordinates from the drone and entered them into the mission planner since the launch point was the only waypoint I couldn't get home. After that, I flashed the flight plan into the onboard autonomous flight computer and was finally ready to begin. As I was checking the video monitor on my base station for the signal being transmitted from the hexacopter, the clear, confident voice of a woman came from behind to the right. "What is that?" I turned and looked down into the clearest, brightest blue eyes I could imagine, and a wave of sadness washed over me, then disappeared instantly. I felt a lifetime of memories with my daughter, watching her grow from a newborn baby to a confident young woman walking down the aisle of our church in a white veil and flowing dress, carrying a beautiful bouquet of freshly cut flowers, her eyes matching the ones that framed her perfectly. The curls of fiery hair of the child I had noticed when I arrived earlier were unmistakable. Of course, the memories I had just experienced of my growing daughter were not real but fantasies. Complications during the birth of our only son eliminated any possibility of having other children, so my dreams of raising a daughter remained just dreams. Even though having a daughter was one of my deepest and earliest desires, I never felt regret after the surgeon told me that my wife was recovering and would be otherwise healthy. I was a happy man, excited about my new growing family, and had nothing but miracles and love in store for our future. "Kate, I told you that you can watch what he does if you stay away and don't disturb him." Their blue eyes matched perfectly, mother and daughter. "She's not bothering me. I'm just trying out new equipment." I made sure my flight plan was successfully fed into the autopilot and launched the flight from my laptop. The hexacopter rose to a height of about 10 feet above the ground, then performed a full 360 degrees turn to the left, repeated the turn to the right, and then stopped in its original direction, pointing across the lake towards a marina filled with large boats. It held its place in altitude perfectly. After passing the final compass test, the hexacopter stopped only briefly, then began to rise out of the water, increasing speed and altitude until it reached its first waypoint in the middle of the open pool, then turned left towards the second waypoint, finally disappearing from our view beyond the nearest area of land and trees. When I heard the woman's voice again, she was standing right behind me. "Are you sure Kate and I aren't disturbing you? If you need to be alone to focus on what you're doing, we can go back to our table." "No, you're not bothering me. But I'm afraid I might not be the most pleasant company if I see what I'm afraid I'll see in about 8 minutes." "What happened? Is everything okay? We should leave if there's any trouble here. I have to protect my daughter." "No, you're safe. I discovered this morning that my wife's phone might be in the cove across the lake, and she told me she was going to lay by her friend's pool in Kingston. I've just noticed too many red flags lately, and I need to know something for sure before my imagination causes me more trouble than I can handle." As I said the last few words, I glanced to my right and saw a fleeting flash of sad understanding on her face. Looking back at my laptop screen, I saw that the telemetry showed the drone had already reached the second waypoint and turned right to the third 2 minutes earlier. I felt a small hand on my left arm, and when I looked that way, I found Kate kneeling on the bench next to me, smiling and looking at the monitor showing the video feed being transmitted back from the hexacopter. "It's beautiful, it feels like I'm flying on an airplane." I couldn't help but smile at her innocence as the drone approached the third waypoint. Realizing that the fourth waypoint would be reached in just a few seconds, I looked at the young mother and said, "If you open the lid of the toolbox in my truck, you should find a set of Frisbee discs. Why don't you take one and play with Miss Kate for a minute? If I'm not completely paranoid, she might not need to see this." "You're right," Kate said. "Come to me for a moment, dear. Mr. Sean has something for us," she added reluctantly. Kate turned and jumped off the bench, heading towards her mother and reaching out for the blue flying disc in her hand. I went back to my laptop and made sure the video stream was being recorded, noting that I still had 73% battery left. When the drone reached the fourth waypoint, just outside the entrance to the bay, it began to climb until it reached 400 feet above ground level. I put on my Fat Shark FPV goggles so I could see the video better than on the sun-drenched monitor and grabbed the transmitter. While I wasn't going to take control of the drone unless absolutely necessary, I wanted to take control of the camera gimbal to guide the camera as the hexacopter circled the bay. I programmed the drone to circle the bay, gradually descending from 400 feet above the ground to 200 feet, then circle again before turning around and returning to the launch point. When the video showed 2 pontoon boats moored in the bay, my heart sank like a hanged man's prize. Hope was gone. I heard a somewhat sad, "Oh no," behind me, and although I couldn't see her face with the FPV goggles, it was obvious that the young mother had seen on the dim monitor what I was seeing in high definition. I only hoped that Kate didn't see what her mother and I saw. 2 large pontoon boats were moored together at the western corner of the bay. I was able to identify my wife, Jessica, and Carmen among the women, but the only man I recognized was Paul Sutton. As I continued to keep the camera trained on the debauchery below, a voice behind me asked, "Is one of them your wife?" "Yes." "Are you absolutely sure?" At that moment, Sarah looked at the drone she had just noticed moving about 100 yards away at the entrance to the bay and stood up, breaking away from the man. "Yes, sure," I said. I removed the FPV goggles, disconnected the battery, and carefully placed them back in the protective case. I figured I had no more than a minute to get ready and make sure the new mother knew not to tell Kate when the call came. This took less time than I expected, as the new phone was ringing almost immediately. In the calmest voice I could muster, I replied, "Hello?" "Hey, Shah, what did you have planned for tonight for dinner?" I was thinking of just grilling myself a burger and messing around in the workshop until I wanted to go to bed. "What are you doing now?" "Just finished mowing the backyard. I'll probably go get some gas and mow the front." "So, are you still home?" "Yes." "What did I forget?" "Something? You were just talking about testing your new batteries last night, and I thought you could do something about it. The batteries are charging now. I'll probably fly around the yard to see how long these last compared to my other batteries while the grill heats up." "Fine." "Sarah, is everything okay?" "You sound weird. Is something going on? Do I need to come to Kingston to pick you up?" "No, it's okay," she replied a little too wearily. "I was just laying here in the sun and wanted to make sure you had something to eat tonight." "It's interesting. Why are you suddenly concerned about my well-being when you haven't spoken to me normally in months? Why this change in mood?" "I was just laying here and thinking about our conversations last night and this morning. I felt like maybe we should try to get back on the same page as before." "Justice, Sarah?" "Yeah, if you still want. Next week, next Saturday maybe, we can go to the mountains like you wanted today. Maybe find an Airbnb and stay the night. That would be nice, right? Why don't I get you a change of clothes and come get you, and we can have a nice dinner tonight? I can jump in the shower and be there in 30 minutes. No, we still have the procedure scheduled for this afternoon, and we'll lose the deposit if we cancel this late. We can do it next week. Let's see." Then I ended the call. Well, did she find out it was you? I cleared my suddenly dry throat and looked at her. "I don't know. I don't think so. I think she may see this as a bad omen, an example of what could happen to my toy, and that she may have just gotten away with it. She believes, or at least wants to believe, I'm home because the first thing she did after seeing the drone was check the Life 360 app on her phone to see where I was." Seeing the look of confusion on the young mother's face, I picked up my cheap Kyocera prepaid phone. I bought it at the convenience store this morning. My real phone is on charge at home, and I forwarded calls from it to this one. Ah, cunning. I knew that if she was smart enough to pause location sharing on her phone, she would certainly check where I was if she saw a drone. Now I'm glad I thought of that, otherwise, I would have just lost that piece of uncertainty which she has. I just did something for the first time in over 20 years, and I don't know how I did it. I lied to my wife. I'm the worst liar in the world. Until that moment, I didn't believe I could lie convincingly to save my life, but I did it, and it felt too natural. In fact, I thought it was strange that someone who understands all this technology would carry such a phone," she said with a slight smile. I simply nodded and responded with my half-serious smile. I was sitting quietly, planning what I needed to do next when the energetic girl's voice sounded again. "He's coming back. I see him. I see him. He's coming back." I had forgotten about my drone on its way back, but now I heard the distinct hum of 6 motors and propellers in the distance. Glancing at the laptop screen, I noticed that the battery level was still 37% just before the drone drifted into a solid hover position, then descended and landed on the ground less than 2 feet from where it had taken off just a bit more than 20 minutes ago. I completed and erased the flight plan from the mission planner and began disassembling my base station and packing it and the rest of my gear. During the post-flight check, Kate stood next to me and asked, "What glasses were you wearing?" I looked at you and couldn't see your eyes. "How do you see through them?" "It's like my own secret movie theater. They let me see what my drone sees." "Do you want to watch it?" I asked, looking questioningly at her mother, who nodded in my direction. "Yes, yes, yes," Kate screamed excitedly, jumping up and down. "Well, I just have a few minutes left on this battery. Why don't we fly around the picnic tables?" Of course, Kate was not going to give up such an adventure. I told her she would need to sit on her mom's lap because the goggles might make her dizzy, and I didn't want her to fall if that happened. "You know, Kate, remember when you said that watching the monitor screen felt like you were flying on an airplane?" "Yes, sir." "Well, when you look through these glasses, you'll really feel like you're in it." I connected the battery to the FPV goggles, adjusted the strap to better fit Kate's head, and asked if she was ready. I then turned the transmitter back on and connected the battery to the hexacopter. After asking Kate again if she was ready, I activated the drone's flight controller and moved the left stick forward slightly, causing the drone to take off. When the motors reached the desired speed, Kate's exclamation of admiration brought a smile to my face, even as my heart felt like it was pumping not blood but molten lead. I did a few laps around the picnic area and parking lot before Kate ripped the FPV goggles off her face and insisted her mother put them on and fly in Mr. Sean's plane. I brought the hexacopter back and landed it on the lowered tailgate of my truck, then began preparing it to go back into the Pelican case and put my transmitter back in its case. Once all my gear was packed into the back seat of my truck, I turned to the young mother and her energetic daughter standing next to the picnic table where my gear had been laid out just 10 minutes earlier. The young mother and I spoke at the same time. I cast a questioning glance at the young mother, and she began to speak. "I don't know why we came here today. We've never been here before, and I'm shocked that Kate even spoke to you, let alone that she approached you first. But most of all, I don't know why I didn't grab Kate and drive away as soon as I saw you get out of your truck. But you looked so lost and confused that I felt like you were in too much pain of your own for me to be afraid that you caused us some pain. And I don't know why I'm going to do what I'm going to do most, because I know you're not thinking about anything other than the fact that someone just pulled the lever in your life and flushed everything you thought you knew down the toilet. But I want to thank you for making Kate special for the last hour. She has never been shown positive attention by any man, and you just showed me that there may still be hope for us. My name is Samantha Kelly, but people usually call me Sam." The sudden burst of dizziness came as a surprise. My face must have paled because Samantha's expression immediately showed concern until I raised my right hand, palm facing her, and shook my head. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. If we had more time, I would explain it to you, but it doesn't really matter." I really didn't want to open a can of worms by explaining my sudden burst of fantasy when I first saw Kate's eyes and linking it to the fact that I had a name for my future daughter long before I met my wife and we got married young. My daughter was destined to be named Samantha Caitlin. Samantha watched me for a few moments, then reached for the prepaid phone in my left hand. "Don't use this one because I know you'll just throw it away after you get home. But before you do, put this number in your real phone. When you're ready to talk to someone, send it to me so I can have your number too." I extended my hand to her phone. "Let me see your phone." As I added a new contact to her Samsung Galaxy 9, I couldn't suppress a half-serious smile. "Thank you, Samantha. I'm glad you and Kate were here today. I'm glad you didn't run away when you saw me drive up, and I'm especially glad Miss Kate spoke to me first. I swear, this girl's smile could bring peace to the world. I'm not sure how I would cope if I were here alone, so thanks for that too." When can I fly on a plane again, Mr. Sean? I don't know, Miss Kate, but maybe someday. I climbed into the driver's seat of my truck and spoke to Samantha through the open passenger window. I need to start some things. I have about 10,000 thoughts in my head, and I know that in a few days or a week, I will need to talk to someone about what's going on. It would be nice to talk to someone who hasn't known Sarah or me for years, who might have a fresh, objective perspective. If you're really interested in talking, I'd like to give you a call. I don't know how objective I can be for several reasons, but unfortunately, I know firsthand how you feel, and I can definitely tell you what to expect in the coming weeks. I hope you decide to call. I'd love to hear from you. Just remember that no matter how painful you are right now, and it will get worse before it gets better, remember to think things through before making long-term decisions. If you make decisions too quickly without thinking them through, you could spend months or longer doubting yourself. I have a question for you, Samantha. Do nail salons make you leave a deposit when you sign up? None of the ones I've ever used. They were all just places to go. I never even booked in advance. Thank you again, Samantha. Stay safe, and I'll talk to you next week. I stopped at the butcher shop on Main Street in Carterville and bought a 2-inch ribeye steak before heading home. Deciding that if my life was going to take a new course, I would try to enjoy every turn, I sat on an Adirondack chair on the back deck, waiting for the coals in the grill to be ready and reflecting on the events of the last few days. I began to remember more closely the small, seemingly insignificant events that had happened over the past few months. The changes were so gradual that I missed them. I noticed a decline in our nightlife. Indeed, I discussed this topic with Sarah on several occasions, but in response, I received only excuses about being tired and stressed at work. In fact, it had been several years since we had shared those intense intimate encounters that were so common at the beginning of our relationship. I had sincerely come to terms with the possibility that our marriage had simply reached the point where the fire of passion had turned to embers, and I secretly hoped that now that our son had left home, we would have a better opportunity to recapture the passion we had at the beginning of the marriage. But my optimism gradually faded away. No, now this optimism is dead and buried. My marriage was over, and it was a foregone conclusion. I was contemplating my options: just file a formal lawsuit and leave to start a new phase of my life, or leave a few smoking craters on my way out. Was I prepared for a confrontation with Sarah as soon as she returned home, or should I wait until everything I had planned was started, or at least ready to be implemented, before the inevitable confrontation occurred? I wanted to talk to Donovan, our son who was serving on a Navy nuclear submarine, but he was on a mission and could be in any ocean on the planet. We might not have contact for up to 6 months, so I wasn't sure when he would receive a non-emergency message from home. Where would I live? I never liked the house that Sarah fell in love with when we got married, but I would be happy living in a cabin. The 25-year mortgage was due in less than 5 years, so we had a significant amount of capital that would need to be divided in the upcoming divorce. Regardless, I knew I would never live in an apartment complex or anywhere near the city again. I would find a house in the countryside, maybe an old country house that I could renovate with a few acres of land, or maybe a lot on one of the rivers or lakes in the area where I could build a boathouse to store the replica I was building, a 1939 Chris Craft barrelback mahogany runabout. If I decided not to stay in my current apartment, I might even move to the mountains of northern Georgia and find a spot on a trout river. No. Despite the misfortune I was going to experience in the near future, when it passes, I will become happy again. I will be happy with my position in life. The banks closed at noon, so it wouldn't be until Monday before I could start separating and transferring finances. I figured I could contact Verizon and Xfinity online and cancel those services later next week once I filed the paperwork. The first step I definitely should have taken was to call Ted and ask him to draft the divorce petition and file it as soon as possible after court opened on Monday, if possible. As I dialed Ted's cell phone number, I braced myself for his inevitable surprise. As far as I knew, no one expected such betrayal from Sarah or me, and neither did I. But I knew that if Sarah had been involved in such activity for almost 6 months, someone must have had some suspicions. I found it hard to believe that she could keep something so significant completely a secret from everyone, so I decided that maybe I should make a few more calls to see what others might have figured out that I missed. Sean, what's up, buddy? Are you ready to go fishing? I still have a cabin in Sashes, and I pulled some amazing rainbow trout out of the Toccoa River this year. Not soon, maybe even sooner than I thought. To be honest, no. This is a personal and professional call. Personal and professional? That sounds a little ominous. Hopefully, nothing happened at work. I haven't heard anything on the news yet, so that's a good sign, I guess. No, not at work. Although I don't think even that would be as painful as what I need from you right now. Not Sarah. Please say it's not Sarah. I'm sorry. I guarantee you won't wish this were wrong any more than I do, but yes, it's Sarah. I need you to file the petition as soon as you can, Monday morning if possible. I want to keep things as quick and clean as possible, at least if you're willing to take on a case like this. I know you mostly do criminal defense. Hell, I don't even remember you ever talking about handling divorces. I don't usually take cases other than criminal defense, but until 10 or 12 years ago, divorces were my main job. I'll take care of everything for you. Let's just find out what terms you want and what happened to lead you to this. I think before I take this case, I need to know if this is related to something she did or if you just found someone else and think the grass is greener. If it's the latter, I'll probably refer you to another lawyer. No, I've never wanted anything from anyone other than Sarah since the first time I saw her. I have evidence that she was with 2 guys on a boat on Lake Alona today, and I'm sure that's it. It's been going on for a while now, maybe at least 6 weeks or so. Between 2 guys? Do you mean intimate contact with another man or, if that phrase means what I think it means, with men? Undeniable evidence. Not something that someone misunderstood or that someone is trying to give you false information about because of personal problems with you or her, for that matter. Undeniable, absolute, certain proof beyond a shadow of a doubt. I have a video of this happening today, a few hours ago. How did you get the video? Who gave it to you? I recorded it myself using the hexacopter I built after the shooting last year, the one my chief and I were trying to convince the county commissioners to budget for the department. I see. Well, we'll have to look into the legalities of obtaining this video without a search warrant, but I'm assuming an experienced detective has already looked into those requirements, right? Yes. They were out in the open on the decks of 2 pontoon boats tied together in a cove on a lake with public access in daylight, clearly visible to anyone who decided to drive by on a boat or other watercraft or fly by in a small aircraft. I'm not sure if the nearby land is private property, but there is no sign of any development in the area, and most of the property in the area is owned by the Army Corps of Engineers, so they had no expectation of privacy in the area that they chose for their games. Well, if this is all true, then there shouldn't be a problem with the video. Of course, the rules of evidence are not quite the same for civil law as they are for criminal cases. Still, it's good that you stuck to the law and what you got. That's a good habit for a detective. Of course, you would make my job easier if you sometimes forgot about the rules in your professional activities, Ted joked. Sorry, I'm just trying to relieve the tension a little. So let's talk about the division of assets. What do you want to get out of this breakup? Equal division of assets. My personal items go with me, hers go with her. 50-50 joint savings and checking accounts, and no alimony since she makes twice my salary. We have a house and property to appraise. She can either pay half the cost, and I'll sign a waiver, or we can sell it and split the proceeds equally. We each keep our retirement savings, and since our son is grown and in the military, we don't have to worry about child support. Remember, nothing else except cars and small things like cell phones. We each keep ours and take on our own responsibilities. I don't want to pay another cent for her, and I don't want anything from her. I would like to explore what we can do against Sutton, although I don't have any evidence to support this idea. I'm sure it started with him. If he's not the main reason for what Sarah did, then he's certainly the impetus that started it. I think you're talking about an alienation of affection claim, right? Alienation of affection arose from old laws where women were viewed as property belonging to their husbands, allowing the aggrieved husband to punish someone who had stolen his property. Georgia doesn't recognize it, and in fact, very few states recognize it now. Well, this is interesting. Welcome to the brave new world where people are free to do as they please. You have to love the legal system. Just get started and we'll see what happens. This is more than fair, at least on paper. I will begin. Thanks, I appreciate it. How much do you need for the advance? I'll give you family rates. Don't worry about it. Look, I don't want to seem ungrateful. I appreciate your help more than you can imagine, but I can't allow you to treat me differently than everyone else. That should never affect either positively or negatively any case I'm investigating where you might have influence on the defense. I cannot risk the integrity of any case in which I am involved. This is a line I am not prepared to cross under any circumstances. I won't say that this opportunity doesn't appeal to me, but despite what you may think, not all lawyers are low-grade scoundrels. Strong ethics are also very important to me. I will give you the best possible representation, and you will find that my services will be very accessible. This will never be an issue between us in the future, except as an act of friendship. Thank you, I replied. Hey, don't get me wrong. I'm not an idiot, but I need to see the video you were talking about. We might need it for negotiations. Yes, I know. I'll email it to you now. Let me get my laptop from home. From home? Where are you? I'm on the patio waiting for the grill to heat up. I bought a RYBY steak from Finley, and I'm going to cook it for dinner on the patio tonight. When are you expecting Sarah home? Not today. She said she was planning to stay the night with her friend Jessica. I think they have other plans, maybe on the lake. At least I'm not expecting her today unless she gets scared enough to change her plans. Well, how about I get myself a steak and come over to your place? We can watch the video together and avoid the hassle of emailing it. You can show me this hexacopter and its capabilities. Who knows, maybe someday I'll need to hire you as a private investigator. Do you have any extra potatoes and bread? I have potatoes for baking and mushrooms for frying, but no bread. Okay, I'll buy some Texas toast. This will be great. I have amber boche in the workshop fridge and an almost full bottle of Woodford Reserve. I'll be there in 30 minutes. By then, the coals were almost white, and I knew they would burn out before Ted arrived, so I added another half packet of charcoal to the grill. I then went into the kitchen to wash, salt, and wrap another large potato with aluminum foil and took them out along with plates and cutlery to set the table on the terrace near the grill. I checked the grill again and noticed that the new charcoal briquettes were already starting to turn white, so I placed them under the left third of the grill, added a grate, placed 2 wrapped potatoes on the cooler right third, and closed the lid. Once the potatoes were ready, I brought my laptop from home, along with my Taro 690 and FR Skyhorus transmitter from the workshop, and prepared them for flight on the table. When Ted arrived, we prepared our steaks with oil, salt, coarse black pepper, minced garlic, and a little onion powder, and started cooking them on the hottest part of the grill. How do you like your steak, Ted? On the cynical side of medium rare, if you don't mind. I usually just take the antlers off, wipe my 5th place, and walk him through a warm room, I laughed. Yeah, I have a friend who says that if a steak is cooked right, a good veterinarian can get it back on its feet, Ted said with a smile. So, this is the hexacopter you were talking about, a drone? I think I understand where it got its name, 6 motors and propellers. Yes, it looks pretty complicated. Is that how you bought it? You mean collected? Yes. Who made it? No, I collected it. I ordered the parts one needed and then assembled them into a single system. Ted just looked at me, smirked slightly, and slowly shook his head. Well, let's watch this video. I turned the laptop screen so we could both see it and started playing the video. When the video began, the drone was standing in the grass, pointed towards the water of the lake. It then slowly rose into the air, turned slightly to the left until the lake was visible again, paused, and then turned another 360 degrees to the right, pausing again in the same direction. Wait, who is this woman and little girl? I thought you said you weren't dating anyone, Ted asked me suspiciously. I'm not dating. I didn't even know her name until I was about to leave. I don't know who she is or where she lives. She and her daughter were on a picnic when I got there. The little girl, Katie, was fascinated by the hexacopter, and I wanted to see how it flies. Suddenly, the video began to rise and tilt forward slightly, then accelerated across the lake towards the marina. About halfway through the water, the video turned left and changed direction to the east, continuing for a little over a minute until the water opened up to another large part of the lake to the right. It then turned in that direction again and began moving south for a few more minutes. As the lake opened into another bay to the left, the video turned east again, and then almost immediately turned left toward the bay. It began to gain height above the hills and trees surrounding the lake. As the video entered the bay, two boats were clearly visible, standing together on the left. The scene on the pontoons was unambiguous. As the drone leveled out, circling inside the bay, it continued its programmed route and began to descend, but the camera remained focused on the boats and the activity below. "Do you recognize anyone other than Sarah?" asked Ted. "Yes, this is Jessica, Sarah's divorced friend. And the one standing next to the blonde in a Panama hat is Sarah's boss, Paul Sutton. The other 6 guys, as far as I know, I've never seen before. Well, I've seen at least 2 of them. They play golf at the country club where I am a member. I heard them discussing buying real estate in a bar last week." James, the one sitting alone on the bench with a can in his hand, was telling Frank, who was standing behind Sarah, that he knew a good agent who could find him the best home. He said this agency offers the best service he has ever seen. Everything began to fall into a certain logical chain. Knowledge doesn't necessarily bring comfort, but it was something. After we finished dinner, I explained how the hexacopter worked, and we discussed how it could be used for surveillance and other investigations. After Ted left, I thought about what we had discussed and remembered a few more minor issues that I would need to address with him in the coming days. I got ready for bed that night, and I slept alone. I really didn't expect Sarah to come home, and I realized that I didn't care. This bothered me, and I began to wonder why I wasn't crushed by Sarah's betrayal. Earlier in the day, when I saw the overwhelming evidence of Sarah's actions, I felt sick, but now I felt more numb than anything else. How could I so quickly and easily lose love for the woman I had spent more than 20 years with? Why didn't I notice the obvious signs earlier? They had become increasingly clearer, especially over the past month. Now that I've given it some serious thought, I remember that during one of the investigative blocks involving interviews and interrogations, instructors emphasized that you should not use these techniques on your loved ones or family members for several reasons. First, the techniques are less effective when used on someone who is very comfortable in your presence. The underlying tension that arises in a police interaction with someone who may be a suspect is a significant catalyst that allows their repressed guilt to become more apparent. In fact, often these techniques result in false returns and indicate the opposite of what they are theoretically supposed to show when used on someone very comfortable with the examiner. And, of course, no man wants to believe that his partner would ever lie and betray him with someone else. But when faced with overwhelming evidence that such a betrayal actually occurred, he has 2 options. Some might say there are more than 2 options, but I don't think so. Firstly, he can accept the betrayal and stay, making peace with the offender and either hoping that she will not stumble again or agreeing with her behavior. Or, he could admit what happened and walk away, leaving her to face the consequences of her decisions. I have to admit that there is a certain temptation to just give in to anger and leave behind a scorched earth with smoking craters, but I prefer a more tactical approach than carpet bombing everything. I was absolutely not prepared to stay and wait to see if she would beg for forgiveness and then count down the days and hours until the next betrayal. No, if she consciously decided to cheat now, she will do it again, and I will not live in such an environment. This trip is over, it's time to move on. I woke up much earlier than usual on Sunday morning, or maybe I didn't sleep much at all. Either way, I was up before dawn and started packing everything I wanted to take with me when moving. As the sun began to shine through the windows on the east side of the house, I stopped to make a quick breakfast of bacon, eggs, and buttered toasted wheat bread. While I was eating, I called one of my old close friends, Jim Wheeler, the detective who works with me, and told him what happened. He was just as stunned as I expected. During our conversation, I told him where Sarah worked and that I had caught her cheating. I also mentioned that I now believe she had been cheating on me for at least 6 weeks and possibly as long as 4 months. I told him I had already started packing my things and planned to move as soon as I found somewhere else to stay, even if it was a motel. "Are you saying Sarah works at Sutton Real Estate on Broad Street?" "Paul Sutton, right?" "Yeah, she's been working there for about 6 months. You need to talk to Detective Stephanie Conrad from the city." "Stephanie Conrad?" "Yes, I know her. We didn't talk often, but I saw her and we exchanged greetings." "Why should I talk to her?" You just need to meet her. She needs to see this video you made. I'll send you her contact information. Call her right after we hang up. Okay, I'll call and find out if she's working today or on call. No, she's at home now. You should get her contact information soon. I just sent it to your phone. My phone emitted a text notification, and I saved the included information as a new contact in my contact list. She just arrived. I saved her in my contact list. I'll call you as soon as we're done. So what's the deal with Conrad? How do you have her contact information on speed dial, and how do you know what she's doing on her day off? And why do I need to show her my video? She and I went on dates a couple of times before I started dating Rachel. That's all. She's been investigating Sutton Real Estate for a couple of months now. He is rumored to be running a brothel out of his office to attract more sales. If the information you have is accurate, then the rumor may be true. Okay, I need to make a few more calls. I need to find somewhere to stay until I find a permanent place. Yes, I will call Conrad. Great. But do you know David Hunter? Yes, day shift sergeant. Yeah, I think he was saying the other day that he has a house on a lake or a camper somewhere near you that he wants to rent out. Give him a call, it might be perfect for you until you find something permanent. Thank you, I replied. I appreciate all your help. Let's meet soon and go fishing or grill some meat. Sounds great. You bring the beer? I ended the call and, instead of calling Detective Conrad, I called David Hunter. Hello? Hey Dave, how are you? Not bad, Gilmore. Just have to keep a close eye on everyone given the current public opinion and attitudes towards the police. How are you doing? Well, to be honest, not really. I just found out that Sarah has been cheating on me for a while now, and I'm moving out. They told me you have a place on the river that you want to rent out? Yeah, it's right off Hardin Bridge Road. Do you know this area? Yes, I know it. I don't know how long I'll stay, just until I find something more permanent, I guess. But I'd like to pick up my things before lunch today if I can. Hopefully before Sarah gets home. That's no problem. How long do you need to be ready to meet me there? I looked at my watch, 7:43. I've already collected most of my clothes and personal items from home. I don't need much, most of my important things are in the workshop. I'll have to pick up my tools and equipment later after I find somewhere to store them. At the Hardin Bridge site, there is an old barn with a dirt floor, and you can climb through most of the walls. But the roof is quite solid and it's dry inside. There's no electricity, but you can store your tools and anything else that won't fit in the camper until you find another place. Sounds great. I can be there in an hour to meet you and get the keys if it's not too early for you. I ended the conversation after he gave me the address and directions to an unmarked gate on the property. When I arrived, Dave was standing at a cattle gate that led through a fence line overgrown with blackberries, honeysuckle, and eastern red cedars into a small clearing adjacent to what appeared to be an old house. Although the house itself had long since burned down or been destroyed, he led me across the clearing along an almost invisible path and about 50 yards into the tree line on the opposite side. Hidden in a grove of trees sat a remarkably modern and well-kept 25-foot camper with 2 slide-outs and a retractable awning. The camper was right on the riverbank, about 20 feet above the surface of the water. When I got out of the truck and shook Dave's hand, I said, "Damn, I might decide to stay here. It's beautiful." Well, I might be inclined to sell the whole property if someone twists my arm just right. I've thought about it for years, but I just couldn't let someone I don't know and trust take my place as a parent. If you're serious, maybe we can talk once I'm done with this case I'm working on in the next few weeks. No problem. Here are your keys. The rent covers the electricity, but you will have to fill up the propane tanks for the heater and stove. The water is from a well 250 feet deep and is clear and sweet. Let me show you the gray water tank. There's no septic tank here. When it's almost full, you can simply disconnect that hose, and it's ready to go. You can pour it out on the site next to the boat station. Removal is free, it belongs to the county. Thanks. I need to get this load off my chest and try to get as much of my tools and equipment as I can before Sarah gets home. When I meet her, I would prefer not to return to the house more often than necessary. Honestly, I don't trust myself. I'm too calm about it, and it worries me. I'm pretty good at compartmentalizing and controlling my anger, but I'd rather not take any more risks than necessary. As it turns out, I didn't need to worry. I made 2 more trips and picked up enough to ensure that if I didn't get anything else out of the property, I wouldn't regret it. I stored my tools and my project boat in a surprisingly large shed on the Hardin property and returned to my new little corner on the riverbank by 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I still hadn't heard anything from Sarah. As I sat in a folding chair by a circle of stones surrounding a small fire, sipping amber ale and watching the water flow below, I remembered that I promised to call Stephanie Conrad. So, I picked up the phone and found her contact information. Hello? Hi, Detective Conrad. How are you this evening? Gilmore. Wheeler said you'd call, but I was expecting a call a couple of hours ago. Yes, sorry about that. I was moving today and didn't have the opportunity earlier. He didn't give me many details. He said you'd explain everything, but he mentioned you have a video that I need to see urgently. Said it was related to one of my active investigations. That's what he told me, too. I can meet you tomorrow either at your office or we can meet for lunch somewhere if you prefer. I'd rather see the video today, if possible. I hesitated. To be honest, it's been a long day, a long weekend, actually. I'm tired and I've already had a couple of beers. I'm afraid I'm busy for the evening. It's okay. I can come to you. Just tell me where you are now. I'm on Hardin Bridge Road, just off Highway 411. Do you think you can find it that far outside of town? I asked, smiling to myself. Yes, smart guy. We have Google Maps and can actually find the places we need these days. We both laughed briefly before she spoke again. Have you already had dinner? Not yet, I replied. I wasn't in the mood today and I need to go to the store before I can plan anything resembling a menu. Okay, I'll be there in an hour. Call me when you turn onto Hardin Bridge, and I'll meet you at the gate on the right side of the road, about 2.5 miles from the 4-lane highway. An hour and 20 minutes later, I closed the gate behind a white Ford Expedition that might have been 6 or 7 years old and led it to my trailer on the river. The petite beauty who stepped out of the driver's door looked stunning in tight jeans that did not hide her almost perfect figure and a loose pullover that took the task of camouflage much more seriously than jeans. Her shoulder-length hair and bright green eyes caught and held my attention as she reached back into the truck and pulled out a yellow box and a pack of Guinness Stout. I hope you like Cajun fried chicken and real beer. I didn't think you drank light beer. Now that I'm here, I hope my assessment was correct. I smiled. I don't drink beer often, but when I do, the lightest I can handle is Yingling. I had amber ale this evening, but I love a good stout. We went to the camper to eat without the company of mosquitoes and midges that wanted to annoy us while we ate. After the meal, Stephanie asked me what I knew about her investigation of Sutton Real Estate. Practically nothing. I only found out this morning that you or someone else is even conducting business for the agency. My wife works there, and I found out this weekend that she has been cheating on me for a while now. Stephanie's face went pale, and she said, "Oh hell, not Sarah Gilmore." I didn't connect it. She looked down at the table for a few seconds, then looked back up at me and continued, "Yeah, I guess she's been cheating on you for almost a month now, as far as I can tell. I think they've been preparing her for this for months, trying to get her into their system. I'm pretty sure she fully joined 3 weeks ago at a party with some agency clients." Looking out the window and listening to Stephanie hammer the final nails into the coffin that now held my marriage, I replied, "She spent the last 6 Saturdays with Jessica Walker at her father's house in Kingston, at least, that's what she told me." Stephanie stood up and went to the refrigerator, returning with 2 more cans of Guinness and passing one to me. We both filled our glasses from the cans. That may be what she did the first 3 of those weekends, but I'm pretty sure she spent the next 2 having fun with the other women from the estate agency. And you're saying she did it again this weekend? Yes, on several pontoon boats in a bay on Lake Alona. Well, that makes sense. I didn't get any reports of them doing anything in town this weekend. She seemed lost in thought for a few seconds, then spoke without looking up from the table, twirling a can of Guinness between her hands. "My case is coming together, and I don't see how I can isolate your wife when I file charges. She already has the bare minimum of half a dozen charges with her name on them. What charges are we talking about? She hesitated again, then looked me in the eyes. Night services solicitation, violation of the Georgia Controlled Substances Act, perhaps more as data and evidence are analyzed. She will be brought in with an arrest, just as guilty as everyone else. Her eyes showed sad sympathy for me, and I asked, isolate her? I'm not asking you to isolate her. I'm telling you that you can start with her if you want. I have no interest in protecting her. She made her choice, let her bear the consequences. Stephanie sat still for a moment, then nodded once and asked me to show her the video. When the video ended, I saved a copy on a spare flash drive from my instructor bag and gave it to her. She said that as a single piece of evidence without real context, it wasn't very strong for her investigation, but when combined with other information she had documented, it was quite devastating. It was the most explicit of all the videos or photos she had collected so far. She briefed me on her investigation, beginning with a complaint from a rival real estate agent who said a potential client had asked if she would be willing to sweeten the deal to secure a sale, as Sutton's agency does. When the agent asked what the client meant, he explained that she should know what he was talking about and that all successful sales agents are women because they are able to perform intim acts to secure a sale. After an agent kicked a client out of her office, she called the police to report the incident, and Stephanie was assigned to the case. The investigation she launched ultimately revealed that Sutton was distributing substances and also running a small night trafficking ring under the guise of a real estate agency. So far, it has included 3 other agencies in its upcoming warrant applications. She and her investigations captain worked with the district attorney, trying to decide how to proceed with the charges against everyone involved. They were trying to figure out how to deal with the chaos that would undoubtedly ensue in the community, affecting other agency clients when the nature of the warrants was eventually revealed. While most sales were likely concluded without the use of intim coercion, doubts that might arise in those innocent families could lead to an increase in calls about domestic disputes. She said both investigators and prosecutors are ready to begin the warrant process within a week or 2, and with this video, she believed they would be ready to start. It was getting late, and we had finished the remaining amber ale and about half of the Guinness she had brought. Stephanie then asked if I minded if she stayed the night so she wouldn't have to call someone to come get her, since she wasn't able to drive a car. Look, I don't want to sound arrogant and I don't want to offend you, but all I can offer is a comfortable folding bed. Despite what Sarah did, I have never broken my vow, and until the paperwork is completed and the order is issued in court, I am still married. Forgive me for overthinking the situation, but I have to admit that you are a temptation and we are both drunk enough that logical thinking is not our priority at the moment. It's a relief, really. My only other option would be to sleep in my truck until I'm sober enough to drive home. I'm not taking the possibility off the table. Let's just agree to discuss it again when things calm down a little, maybe? Sounds great. Do you have a jump bag in your truck? No. I have a getaway bag at home but nothing in my truck. There should be a big t-shirt that you can wear if you want. Have you noticed the shower head on the hose hanging on the bathroom wall? The entire bathroom is a shower. There is no bathtub. You go first. I don't know how much hot water will last, and I'll lower the table and prepare your bed while you're there. When Stephanie came out of the bathroom, still wearing my old Pink Floyd Wish You Were Here t-shirt that went almost to her knees, I got a clearer view of what her sweater had so successfully hidden. I began to question the wisdom of my decision that we should sleep in separate beds. But then I realized that this self-analysis only reinforced our need for separation. What time do you need to be at work in the morning? I asked before entering the private bedroom. 9 a.m., she said. Okay, breakfast is around 7 o'clock, and you should have time to go home and change for work. I then closed the door and lay down between the sheets. On Monday morning, I woke up with a dry mouth and a slight throbbing in my temples, but not hungover. I opened the door to the small bedroom at the end of the camper as if I was on a mission and froze when I saw Stephanie standing in front of my stove, still wearing my Pink Floyd t-shirt and seemingly nothing else. As she turned her head in my direction, she said, "Good morning to you too, but I don't think it's fair or polite to make me sleep here on this uncomfortable pile of pillows if you're going to tease me like that in the morning," smiling. I looked down and realized what she was talking about. I was sleeping without anything and had forgotten about the night visitor, so I hadn't put on any clothes before starting my trip to the bathroom. I turned and walked back into the bedroom, putting on some running shorts and a t-shirt from the top box of clothes I had grabbed from my dresser when I moved house the day before. Maybe I was a little hungover after all. When I returned from the bathroom, I apologized to Stephanie for exposing my without anything to her. Don't apologize. I promise I don't mind. She then smiled again. I closed the gate after both trucks left and headed to my office while Stephanie presumably went home to change into clean work clothes before heading to work. I was in the office earlier than the other detectives and began looking through my open cases to see which ones needed to be processed first. After quickly scrolling through 36 active tasks and highlighting 5 to work on for the day, I pulled my cell phone out of my pocket and opened the Messages app. I had over a dozen text messages and noticed that I had 16 missed calls and 9 voicemails. Now I realized why I hadn't heard anything from Sarah the night before or the night before that. I still had the ringtone on my phone turned off. As I listened to the voicemails, I noticed that they started out angry and argumentative, but by the time Sarah left her last message, she was crying, apologizing, and asking me to come home. The progression of text messages almost mirrored the voice messages without saying anything different. I sent her a text message saying I was busy with a few things and would talk to her later in the evening if I had a chance. She started calling me again, and I turned off the ringtone once more. At almost 10 a.m., I called the law firm of Parker, Kilgore, and Hughes and asked for Ted's office. Ted Kilgore's office, how may I help you? I need to talk to Ted, please. This is Sean Gilmore. He's waiting for my call. Wait a minute, please. Sean, how are you this morning? You haven't done anything stupid since we talked on Saturday, right? No, buddy. I've moved, and I'm renting a camper from a patrol sergeant near U-Haul. I haven't seen Sarah since Friday, well, at least not in person. Did you talk to her? She blew up my phone yesterday and this morning, but I just said I'd talk to her later tonight if I got a chance. Okay, don't try to take revenge. Let me sort it out through the court. Were you able to submit the documents this morning? No, it will be tomorrow, most likely right after lunch, before I submit them to the court office. Well, we need to meet again. There have been some changes since we spoke on Saturday night. You don't represent any of the guys who were on the boats with Sarah, right? Legally, no. I was not approached or hired by any of them. Okay, so I hired you. Now what's going on, Sean? I thought for a minute, not knowing how much I could tell Ted, as a defense attorney, about Stephanie's case without jeopardizing it. There are some mechanics around this situation that promise to get pretty messy soon, and I need to make sure that we don't run into a conflict of interest with you representing me in the theoretical defense of some other participants in a theoretical criminal case that may arise in the near future. Understand? What do you think of our story today? In my opinion, the wife deliberately created unfounded conflicts to make the husband think that something was wrong. What's your opinion of the wife's actions? Write in the comments. Until new videos.